I had been driving for Uber for about 6 months when this happened, and I thought I knew how to handle myself in strange situations. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:30. I got a ping for a pickup in the suburbs, which was unusual for that time. Most late-night rides were downtown bar pickups. But the fare looked good, so I accepted. The app gave me an address on Maple Street. I had never been to that neighborhood before. It was one of those older suburban areas where the houses were built in the 70s. Big yards, mature trees, streetlights spaced too far apart. My GPS took me down the main road and then into a maze of residential streets. I turned onto Maple and started looking for house numbers. The problem was that most of them weren't visible from the street. Mailboxes were hidden behind bushes. Porch lights were off. I slowed down, trying to read the numbers on curbs, but they were faded or missing entirely. My app said I was getting close. 200 feet. 100 feet. You have arrived at your destination. But I was sitting in front of an empty lot. Just overgrown grass and a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for years. I checked the address again. 2847 Maple Street. That's what the app said. That's where I was. But there was no house. I called the passenger. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I sat there for a minute, debating what to do. Then I noticed something. Across the street, 1 house over, there was a driveway with a car parked in it. The porch light was on. Maybe they had given me the wrong number by mistake. I pulled across the street and parked in front of that house. The number on the mailbox said 2844. Close enough. Maybe they had just transposed the digits. I sent a text saying I was outside and waited. After 2 minutes, I saw movement at the front window. A curtain shifted slightly. Someone was looking out. But nobody came to the door. I waited another minute and texted. Again. Still no response. This was getting weird. I was about to cancel the ride when my passenger door suddenly opened. A man got in the back seat. He moved fast, pulling the door shut hard behind him. I jumped, startled. I hadn't even seen him come out of the house. He was maybe 40, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. His face was partially hidden by a baseball cap pulled low. He told me to drive. Not hello, not thanks for waiting, just drive. I asked him where we were going. He said he would tell me once we got moving. That was against my policy. I always confirmed destinations before driving anywhere, but something about his tone made me put the car in gear. I pulled away from the curb and headed back toward the main road. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, trying to get a better look at him. He was sitting directly behind me, leaning forward slightly, watching the side mirror. I asked again where he wanted to go. He told me to take the highway north. That was it. No specific address, no cross streets, just north. I told him I needed a destination in the app or I couldn't continue the ride. He reached into his jacket pocket and my heart stopped, but he just pulled out his phone. He said he would enter it himself in a minute, that he just needed to get away from this area first. That's when I noticed his hands were shaking and there was dirt under his fingernails. Fresh dirt, like he had been digging. I got to the highway entrance and merged into light traffic. He was still watching the mirrors obsessively. I asked if everything was okay. He told me to mind my own business and drive. I should have pulled over right then. I should have ended the ride and told him to get out. But I was on the highway now, doing 65, and he was directly behind me where I couldn't see his hands. He finally spoke again. He said he needed to get to a truck stop about 40 miles north. He said his car had broken down and his phone was dying. He apologized for being tense, said he had been having a bad night. It sounded reasonable, but my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. The way he had gotten into the car, the way he kept checking behind us, the dirt on his hands. I stayed in the right lane, driving exactly the speed limit. I was trying to think of an excuse to pull over somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses, a gas station, a rest area, anywhere I could safely tell him to get out. Then I saw flashing lights behind us, way back, maybe a quarter mile. Police lights, multiple vehicles. They were coming up fast in the left lane. The man saw them too. He leaned forward even more and told me not to slow down. He told me to keep driving normally. His voice had changed. It was harder now, colder. The police cars flew past us, at least 4 of them, sirens blaring. They were in a hurry, going somewhere with purpose, and I watched in my mirror as they took the exit we had just passed. The exit for Maple Street. The man sat back slowly. He didn't say anything, but I could hear him breathing. Short, quick breaths. I made a decision. I put on my turn signal and started moving toward the right shoulder. I told him I was having car trouble, that I needed to pull over. He told me to keep driving. I said I couldn't, that the engine was making a noise. It was a lie, but I said it with conviction. I pulled onto the shoulder and put the car in park. I told him I needed to check something, that it would just take a minute. I got out of the car quickly and walked to the front, lifting the hood. My hand was on my phone in my pocket, ready to call 911. I waited to see what he would do. He got out of the back seat. For a second, I thought he was going to come at me, but he just stood there by the passenger door, looking back down the highway toward where the police had exited. Then he started walking. He didn't run. He just walked into the grass beside the highway and kept going, heading toward a line of trees about 100 yards away. He never looked back. I got in my car, locked the doors, and called 911. I told them everything. The wrong address, the strange pickup, the man's behavior, the police cars heading to Maple Street. The dispatcher told me to stay where I was, that they were sending someone to me. A state trooper arrived in less than 10 minutes. I told him the whole story again. He asked me to describe the man in detail. He took notes and made radio calls. He told me to wait while he checked something. 20 minutes later, 2 detectives showed up. They asked me the same questions, more detailed this time. They wanted to know exactly which house I had picked him up from. They showed me a photo on a tablet and asked if this was the man. It was him. Same face, same cap. They told me his name but asked me not to share it publicly. They said he was wanted in connection with a home invasion on Maple Street. An elderly woman had been attacked in her home. She had managed to hit her medical alert button before losing consciousness. The police had responded fast and surrounded the area, but he had already fled on foot. They thought he had stolen a car. Instead, he had ordered an Uber using the victim's phone. He had given an address for an empty lot, then watched from the actual house across the street until I showed up. I had picked up a wanted violent criminal and driven him away from a crime scene while police were actively searching for him. The detectives told me I had done the right thing by pulling over and calling. They asked if I would be willing to testify if needed. I said yes. They caught him 3 days later. He had made it to another town and tried the same thing with a taxi driver. But that driver had recognized him from the news and drove straight to a police station with him in the back seat. I stopped driving for Uber after that. I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I got a ping for a suburban pickup at night, I would remember his face in my rearview mirror, the way his hands shook, the dirt under his nails, the moment those police cars flew past us on the highway, and I think about that elderly woman on Maple Street, how close he had been to getting away completely, how a wrong address on an app had almost let a violent criminal disappear into the night. I never went back to that neighborhood. I don't even like driving past the exit anymore, because I know what can be waiting at the end of a wrong address. I moved into my apartment in March, a small 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of an old building downtown. The rent was cheap because the building was outdated and the landlord was lazy about repairs. But it was mine, and I was happy to finally live alone. The apartment directly above me was empty when I moved in. I had asked the landlord about it during the walkthrough. He said the previous tenant had left suddenly, breaking the lease. He was planning to renovate it before renting it out again. For the first 2 weeks, it was quiet. I could hear the neighbors on my floor occasionally, normal sounds of people living their lives. But above me, nothing, just silence. Then one night, I woke up to footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps directly above my bedroom. Back and forth, back and forth. I checked my phone. 3:15 in the morning. I figured the landlord had finally started the renovations and hired workers who kept strange hours. But the footsteps weren't work sounds. They were just walking, pacing, and they went on for over an hour before stopping. It happened again 2 nights later. Same time, 3 in the morning. The pacing started and continued until almost 4:30. I was getting irritated. I decided to talk to the landlord the next day. When I called him, he seemed confused. He said he hadn't started renovations yet. He hadn't hired anyone. The apartment was still empty, locked up. He asked if I was sure I was hearing something from above and not from the neighbors beside me. I was sure. The sound was definitely coming from the ceiling. He said he would check it out and get back to me. That night, I stayed awake on purpose. I wanted to hear it again, to confirm I wasn't imagining things. At 3:12, the footsteps started. I grabbed my phone and recorded audio for 5 minutes. Clear, rhythmic pacing directly above me. I sent the recording to my landlord the next morning. He called me back within an hour. He said he had gone to the apartment, above mine, to check. The door was locked, exactly as he had left it. No signs of entry. But when he went inside, he noticed something strange. There were wet footprints on the floor, leading from the bathroom to the bedroom and back. The apartment had no water, no utilities turned on. The footprints were fresh. He couldn't explain them. He said he was going to change the locks and install a security camera in the hallway. He told me to call the police if I heard anything else. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept listening for the footsteps, but they didn't come. The apartment above stayed silent. 3 days passed. Nothing. I started to relax, thinking maybe the landlord's visit had scared off whoever had been getting in. Then, on Saturday night, I heard something different. Not footsteps, dragging. Like something heavy being pulled across the floor above me. It started around midnight and lasted maybe 10 minutes, then silence. I called the police. I told them someone was in the apartment above mine, that they were trespassing. 2 officers showed up within 20 minutes. They went upstairs with the landlord, who had rushed over with his keys. I waited in my apartment, listening. I heard them open the door above me. I heard them walking around, checking rooms. After about 15 minutes, one of the officers knocked on my door. He asked me to describe what I had heard. I told him about the dragging sound. He exchanged a look with his partner. He said they had found something. In the bedroom above mine, someone had moved all the furniture to the walls. The center of the room was completely empty, and in that empty space, there were marks on the floor. Deep scratches in the hardwood, like something had been dragged in circles repeatedly. But there was no one in the apartment. No signs of forced entry. The windows were locked from the inside. The only door was the one they had just unlocked with the landlord's key. The officers took photos and filed a report. They said they would increase patrols in the area. The landlord was shaken. He said he was going to have the locks changed again and install a steel security door. I asked if I could break my lease. He said he would understand if I wanted to, but I had just moved in. I had barely unpacked, and I couldn't afford to lose my deposit and pay new moving costs somewhere else. I decided to stay, but I bought a heavy deadbolt for my door and kept a bat next to my bed. The footsteps came back 4 days later, but this time they were different, slower, stopping at certain points, like someone was searching for something, or listening. I was lying in bed, frozen, when I heard it, a sound directly above my headboard, a slow scraping, then a creak, then silence. I grabbed my phone and texted my landlord. I told him it was happening again. He said he was calling the police and coming over. While I waited, I heard something that made my blood go cold. A voice, faint, muffled by the ceiling, but definitely a voice. It sounded like someone was talking to themselves. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. The police arrived quickly this time. The same 2 officers from before. They went upstairs, and I heard them open the door, then shouting, movement, struggle sounds. They came down 15 minutes later with someone in handcuffs. A woman, maybe 30, dirty clothes, wild hair. She was talking rapidly, nonsensical sentences that didn't connect. One of the officers told me she had been living in the crawl space above the apartment. There was an access panel in the closet that led to a gap between the 3rd floor and the 2nd floor ceiling. She had been climbing in through a ventilation grate on the roof. She had been up there for weeks, maybe longer. She had belongings stored in the crawl space, blankets, food wrappers, empty water bottles. The footsteps I had been hearing were her moving around in that narrow space above the apartment. The scratches on the floor were from where she had been trying to pry up the floorboards. She told the officers she was looking for something she had hidden before she was evicted. She insisted she used to live in my apartment, not the one above. She said the landlord had stolen something from her and she was getting it back. The landlord confirmed she had been a tenant in the building 2 years ago, but she had lived on the 3rd floor, not the 2nd. She had been evicted for non-payment and had left owing 3 months' rent. She had mental health issues that had gone untreated. They took her away. The landlord sealed the roof access and the crawl space entrance. He offered to let me out of my lease with no penalty. I moved out the next week. I couldn't stay there knowing someone had been living above me, listening to me, crawling around in the dark just feet from where I slept. Sometimes I still think about those footsteps, the pacing back and forth, the dragging sounds, and I think about how wrong addresses aren't always about going to the wrong place. Sometimes they're about someone else thinking they're in the right place, even when they're not, even when that place is your home. I work for a courier service that handles late-night medical deliveries between hospitals and clinics. Most of the time it's routine. Lab samples, medication, documents. Nothing dramatic. But one delivery last October changed how I think about addresses. I got a call around 10:30 at night for an urgent pickup. A small clinic on the east side needed lab results delivered to a private residence. The dispatcher said it was time-sensitive, that the patient was waiting for the results before making a treatment decision. The pickup was easy. I signed for a sealed envelope at the clinic and entered the delivery address into my GPS, 4521 Oakwood Drive. The GPS showed it was about 20 minutes away in a residential area I vaguely knew. I drove through the city and into the suburbs. The streets got quieter. The houses got bigger. I turned onto Oakwood Drive and started looking for numbers. The street was long and winding, houses set far back from the road. The GPS said I was getting close. I slowed down, checking mailboxes. 4,515, 4,517, 4,519. Then the numbers jumped to 4,525. I had passed it somehow. I turned around and drove back slowly. There it was, 4,521. But it wasn't a house. It was a driveway leading into darkness between 2 properties. No mailbox, no house visible from the road, just a narrow paved drive disappearing into trees. I checked the address again. Definitely 4,521 Oakwood. I turned into the driveway. My headlights showed trees pressing in on both sides. The pavement was cracked and uneven. I drove slowly, following the curve of the driveway for maybe 200 feet. Then I saw the house. It was set back in a clearing, completely hidden from the street. A large 2-story structure, dark except for one lit window on the first floor. The architecture looked old, probably early 1900s. The yard was overgrown. I parked in the circular drive in front of the house and checked the envelope. The name on it matched the address. This was the right place. I got out and walked to the front door. There was no doorbell that I could see, just a heavy brass knocker. I used it 3 times. The sound echoed inside like the house was mostly empty. I waited. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone to call the dispatcher and noticed I had no signal, not even one bar. I walked back toward my van, trying to get reception. Nothing. That's when I heard the door open behind me. I turned around. A man was standing in the doorway, backlit by the dim interior light. I couldn't see his face clearly. He asked if I was the courier. I said yes and walked back to the door. I told him I had a delivery from the clinic. He said to bring it inside, that he needed to verify the contents before signing. That was unusual. Most people just signed and took the envelope. But he had already turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door open. I followed him inside. The entryway was dark wood paneling and old wallpaper. The air smelled stale, like the house had been closed up for a long time. The only light came from a room at the end of a hallway. He was already walking toward it. I followed, holding the envelope. My footsteps sounded too loud on the hardwood floor. The house felt wrong, too quiet, too empty. but I told myself I was just nervous because it was late, and the house was isolated. We entered what looked like a study, dark wood bookshelves, a large desk, papers scattered everywhere, the lit window I had seen from outside. He turned to face me and gestured for the envelope. I handed it to him and pulled out my electronic signature pad. He opened the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. He read them slowly, his face expressionless. Then he looked up at me and said there had been a mistake. I asked what kind of mistake. He said these results weren't for him. They were for someone else, someone who didn't live here anymore. I told him the address on the envelope matched his house. He shook his head. He said his wife had lived here, past tense. She had been the patient, but she had passed away 3 weeks ago. I didn't know what to say. I told him I was sorry. He said the clinic must have sent the results to their old address by mistake. They had moved her to hospice care before she died, but the clinic still had this house on file. He handed the envelope back to me. He said I should return it to the clinic. I said I would. I asked him to sign the pad anyway, confirming the delivery attempt. He signed without looking at it. I told him again that I was sorry for his loss. He nodded, but didn't say anything. I turned to leave, wanting to get out of that dark house as fast as possible. But when I reached the hallway, I heard him say something behind me. He asked if I had noticed anything strange about the address. I stopped and looked back. He was standing in the doorway of the study, silhouetted again. I said I hadn't, that the GPS had brought me right to it. He said that was interesting, because the driveway entrance was marked 4,521 on the county records, but when they had lived here, they had always used 4,519 as their address, the main house number. The 4,521 was supposed to be for a guest cottage that had burned down years before. He said someone must have changed it in the system, but he didn't know who or why. He said I should be careful driving back out, that the driveway was dangerous at night. I thanked him and walked quickly back to my van. When I got in and started the engine, I looked back at the house. He was standing at the lit window, watching me. I drove back down the long driveway faster than I should have. When I got back to the main road and my phone signal returned, I had 3 missed calls from the dispatcher. I called back immediately. She sounded relieved. She asked where I had been, said she had been trying to reach me for 20 minutes. I told her I had just completed the delivery to 4,521, Oakwood. There was a long pause. Then she said I must have the address wrong. The delivery had been to 4,519, Oakwood, not 4,521. The patient was waiting and had called twice asking where I was. I looked at the envelope in my passenger seat. It clearly said 4,521. I told her that's where I had been. She said 4,519 was just 2 houses down from where I had turned. A regular suburban house with lights on and cars in the driveway. I sat there trying to understand. I had delivered to the wrong address, but the man had known about the clinic. He had known about his wife being a patient. He had opened the envelope like he was expecting it. The dispatcher told me to go back and deliver to the correct house. I did. Number 4,519 was exactly where she said, 2 houses down, a normal-looking house with a woman who was very annoyed about the delay. She signed for the envelope and closed the door without thanking me. I drove back past 4,521 on my way out of the neighborhood. I slowed down to look at the driveway entrance. The house was dark now, no lit window. The driveway looked different too, more overgrown, like it hadn't been used in a long time. The next day, I looked up the property records online. 4521 Oakwood Drive was listed as vacant. The last recorded occupant had died 4 years ago. The property had been in estate limbo ever since. No one had lived there recently, but I had been inside that house. I had talked to someone. He had signed my pad. When I checked the signature log, it was there. A scrawled name I couldn't read, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. I asked my dispatcher if she had any record of who had placed the delivery order to that address. She checked and said it had come through the clinic's automated system. No specific person had requested it. The address had been pulled from an old patient file. I never found out who the man in that house was. Maybe he was squatting there. Maybe he had a key and was clearing out belongings. Maybe he had seen my headlights and decided to intercept whatever I was delivering. Or maybe addresses hold on to the people who lived there, even after they're gone. Maybe when you enter the wrong numbers into a system, you don't just get the wrong house. Sometimes you get the wrong time, the wrong version of a place that shouldn't exist anymore. I still work for the courier service, but now I always double-check addresses before I drive down unmarked driveways, because sometimes the wrong address isn't a mistake. Sometimes it's exactly where you're meant to go, even if you shouldn't be there at all.